A little time to get on. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about leadership. So,
hey, Tony,
yes.
The camera's pointed at the ceiling.
It is.
Oh, Lisa's phone.
Oh.
We can't see your handsome face. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so we're going to go here. There we go. Does everybody hear me okay?
Yep, see and hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so with any effective leadership, you have to be seen, first of all, I guess. And also, we're gonna start off by saying everybody can be a leader. That was one of the questions I think Angie and I had discussed over the weekend. I stepped in. We needed someone to speak today, so I developed this yesterday. But everybody can be a leader. You can teach leadership. You can anybody can be a manager. I think if we want to talk about the difference between management and leadership, I'll go back so before I started with Chamber all through college and when I first got my job, I spent about 12 years in retail. And one of the interesting things about retail is when I worked for that, it was more of a manager. So one of the things when you walked in the morning there was they would divide the daily goal between whoever was working that day, and there'd be a specific goal based on credit cards and different items with that. So that was more of a management style. So we weren't able to give our input on that. We weren't able to look at. There was just specific things we had to follow. There was too many rules, and in my opinion, there wasn't enough feedback. We weren't taking care of customers. We weren't interacting. There was no interpersonal relationship. So interpersonal development is something we'll talk about, but there was no interpersonal communication there. We weren't connecting with the customers. We weren't even connecting as a team, essentially, because we were all either pitted against each other on who could get the most sales that day, or if you weren't doing sales or somebody took over for you, I was written up for putting by somebody's number under somebody else's, which not necessarily was something I didn't do intentionally, but that's how it goes. So you're just managing people, and I don't think that's as a true leader you're not leading. So I feel like we're going to talk about that. So that kind of gives you a difference between there. So when I talked about motivating kind of in an interpersonal environment, so when we talk about, so think about all the times that you're leading throughout the day. So you're either leading in your families, your community groups, your offices, schools, churches, anything that you have when you're interacting with people, you are essentially leading them. We make decisions for our kids every day. We just wake up and say, why do we do this? So I want you to realize that every single thing that we do, even if you are a one-person office or you're part of a team and you're maybe not I just think titles are titles. I'm the president, but that's just my title. That's not what I do or who I am. So we need to be aware of that. But everybody has the ability to influence. So your interpersonal qualities that I want to touch upon are empathy. So we need to understand where where the other person is coming from. I think that's key when you're working with any type of group or your team or yourself, because even when you're interacting with your customers, if you think about it, Tina, you're really trying to understand what their needs are, how you're going to help them through the process with like the aid. What you need to understand what their needs are, and if you're not empathetic to that, then you've already kind of lost from the beginning. Chris, that would kind of be the same thing for you when you're working with facials or anybody that has anything to do with them personally. You really have to have that empathy. Lisa, I think Lisa's here with me. Lisa Zweifel. Many of what you do is empathetic. You have to understand where those victims are coming from. Jerry's here with Senior Services Resources. You have to understand what we had talked about when you first came in was understanding where somebody that maybe hasn't dealt with their insurance or any of that stuff you know, now they have to understand all these things at the last minute of what to choose, where to go, what to, so.
You know, on a bigger level, a leader, if he or she surrounds themselves with good people, one of the highest priorities for a leader is being able to listen. Listening is imperative because people that have ideas, people that have concerns, people that have good feelings as to how to put somebody in a good position to make sure that their life is safe and secure and they're able to make the best decisions for themselves, has to be able to listen to it. And you mentioned team. You have to be able to listen to your team. You put those people around you so that they could take care of issues, so that they could deal with people's problems, come to conclusions and make solutions, provide solutions for people. That all comes from listening. It's not all inside here. That's not the way it works. But you have to be able to put yourself in a position where you can lead the people around you and elicit their discussions and their thoughts and their goals to help other people. When you're able to listen to that, then you're at a point where you can put together some great ideas, great solutions for people's goals, needs, and comfort level.
Yep.
High priority.
So I think active listening is very important.
Bingo.
When you're trying to do that. Same thing with body language too. People really read about 80% of what you're conveying, not verbally. So you really want to watch where you're interacting with people and really paying attention to them when they're speaking and really being active with them.
My wife says it's written across my forehead.
A couple of those other interpersonal qualities that we want to touch upon is diplomacy, adaptability. I think you need to be able to adapt as a leader. Mediation, that kind of comes into play when you're dealing with multiple people, even with your customers as well. Patience and analytical thinking. So those are all kind of those interpersonal qualities that we want to. Communication is always key. When you have miscommunication, then it always equals trouble. So you really need to develop like a process for yourself and your team that really kind of smooths the communication styles. Everybody has an opportunity to talk, things like that. So those kind of gives you through leadership, management, interpersonal skills that we need to get to those leadership qualities. And now I have, so I came up with 5, kind of like your leadership development toolkit is what I'm calling it. So there's 5 things that I'll discuss, and you guys can ask questions and chime in. Really just want to kind of be interactive this morning. So number 1 is about sharing your experiences. So we all have great kind of stories to tell. Like I just talked about, my experience with my retail side and how that as a leader was frustrating for me because I couldn't, I was limited on what I could do, think, talk about, and so you really want to, during the process when you are leading your group or your team, you need to really share what your feelings are, what your processes have been. Does anybody have a good time where they've kind of shared with their team maybe a opportunity or?
We do at the Child Center for our monthly meeting. At the end of every meeting, we have what's called a mission moment.
Okay.
And you can kind of just share, something that is mission oriented to what we're doing, and it's usually celebrating another coworker or something that was a good outcome from a case that we had.
Okay.
And it's always just kind of leaves the meeting with everyone feeling good, and it's just a way to kind of shout out, to your other fellow coworkers, because we don't usually get to see everybody all the time, all day long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really great way to just kind of communicate as a group, but then being able to kind of shout out to your team.
Yeah. Anybody else have something that they do at their business that would be something where you're sharing your experiences or walking maybe a customer through your experience to help them?
So I can share, I have a virtual assistant every Monday. She's overseas, so every Monday we jump on a call and we go through a cash talk. and it's where she's kind of just going through the things that she learned, any trouble spots and things like that. Well, one of the things that has come up is that I'm a very, I'm definitely not a manager, and I'm a very kind of, hands-off isn't the right word. However, sometimes I don't give the best directions and enough detail in directions. And that's caused my assistant sometimes to do things, make things more complicated for her. So that's kind of just from a leadership perspective, it's always looking in the mirror. And so, me recognizing that, I sometimes need to give her better directions so that she can excel. And to me, that's really a big part of leadership is you always have to go back and look in the mirror, especially when you have people working for you. You don't ever want to start with, oh, they did something wrong, when really the truth is, I didn't give good enough directions, and I didn't give good enough guidance is more often, I would say, probably the case if something isn't working correctly.
Yeah, so you're using more of like a laissez-faire type of leadership style there, Angie, where you're giving your employees their opportunity to work their own problems through there, but there is some direction as you're passing it along too. So you really need to look, number 3 on my list was put yourself in the other person's shoes. So when we start out a project or we're handing over something, we really have to understand, okay, now I may hand over the end of summer bash to Belle. Well, Belle's never done the end of summer bash before, so anything that I would think, oh, well, we have to get the supplies, and we got to get this, and we have to make sure that we call the city. And those are things that I know in my mind, but if I don't communicate them with her or understand that when she has to start the project, if she doesn't have the necessary information to start off with, she's able to make her own decisions. I think when you're being laissez-faire, you want to make sure that you're giving them enough direction that they can make their own decisions, but they have enough information to kind of go from.
You don't want to leave them at a disadvantage to start a new project, because then it's off on the wrong foot to begin with, and then success for that may be slim and none. So if you get started with the right information, the right directions, then everybody has unique ideas and has ways to do specific things. So they can guide the project, but then you listen to your people around you and use what they're sharing with you. Then you're talking about building success.
Yeah. So Angie, you're gonna give her the opportunity to figure out the best way for herself to do those aspects of her job, but you got to give her the information to actually kind of do that. So I mean, that's just we may think that's something that we naturally will just do, but we need to think about it from we started on day 1 and everything that we've learned so far, and that's sometimes hard to do every aspect. So.
I also think there's that part too where you are like, okay, let's welcome the communication. Tell me, like, give me your thoughts on like Biz Bits. Like we all sat down to do a debrief, and you were like, okay, give me your thoughts on Biz Bits, and I said, well, this, and then Belle said this, and Jerry said that, and you were like, yeah, I don't think so. That sometimes can happen with a leader or the person in charge. Is they're somewhat seemingly asking for feedback or an open dialogue, but they're really not interested. They're doing it just as a step because they already know what they're going to do and not going to do. And I think that can also...
So I think that's when you come back to that management style. You're not leading your team. You're stepping through the processes. So if you're going to be looking at a book, just like they would divide the sales numbers up for the day between us, number of hours that we've worked, times whatever, they're going to do that. And they're going to say, oh yeah, we want your feedback. But when you don't get heard time and time again, then your breakdown of communication starts, your trust, and so all of those things as a leader we're going to lose right away. So anybody else that go ahead.
Yeah, just to add another layer to what Lisa just said, I think a really good question, if you truly want to understand where someone's coming from, maybe they say something you don't agree in that moment, but then tell me more about that, so that you can truly understand where they're coming from. And the other thing that, so my virtual assistant, she's from the Philippines. Their culture is very different. And I really had to help her because she's very apologetic for no reason a lot of times, like no good reason in my opinion. Like you didn't do anything wrong. And so it's been a learning curve for me to make sure that I'm reinforcing the fact with her that I truly do want you to share ideas. I truly do want you. I want your voice. I need your voice. That's why I have you here. And in that leadership role, sometimes she will have an idea or she'll question something and it's not correct. I have to be very careful how I respond. You know what I mean? I have to be very careful and make sure that I'm validating her at the same time by gently letting her know that actually here's why we're going to do this instead. So that because I don't want her to ever go back and think, oh, I'm not going to say anything. So that's another, just a little, we really have to try to know our people and understand where they're coming from to make sure that we're not, and I'm very hyper aware of that because I'm a PID, I'm a very direct person. So a lot of people tell me I'm diplomatic. Well, it's because I have to work really hard at it because I'm not naturally that way. So that's just another, to me, in terms of leadership, is really understanding where people are coming from and making sure that we're not unintentionally stepping on them.
Yeah. Watch out your reactions. I think
That's a
one
good
of the
point.
things too. So just kind of take a step
And
back.
body
Don't,
language, too.
yeah, body language. Everything's not personal too. In regards to some processes, it's the process that maybe needs to be fixed, not something necessarily with you or them. And so when we take it personally, then we kind of shut down there too. When it could be something just as simple as a process being restructured or the way that we're communicating, we need to think about that too. So,
yeah.
Okay. Along those same lines of putting yourself in their shoes is asking the right questions. So one of the things you want to do is, even with like your customers, is have them talk you through, if you're going to ask them, like, how can we, like when we have a debrief, you brought up a debrief, walk me through a way that might solve, or the way that you did the process. Like, how did you, let's see, we're working in teams in the board, and so I'm thinking, like, if one of the teams is working on membership recruitment, so looking the way that group is approaching recruitment and retention versus the way that the staff does it, I think we can learn from one another. I've kind of stepped off of that to kind of see how the teams would kind of form, and I think that teaches you kind of new ways that maybe they've solved the different problems. So you're asking those questions of, you're kind of being a problem solver essentially as a leader. So, and everybody's going to solve a problem a little bit differently than you, and we can learn and adapt to those. So is there any kind of situation, maybe even like your customers could walk you through, if you're thinking, okay, maybe this process could be better, or Tina, is there anything that you walk your customers through when they come in? Tina, I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me this time? Because
Yep.
earlier you're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so yeah, as a new customer, we do go through a lot of different procedures in the egg, or what they can expect, or what they're looking to experience, and then I do try to talk a lot with clients about basically teaching them about their issues, maybe what might be causing it, root causes. But as I don't really have any employees, and if I make the decision and it's the wrong one, it's all my fault. So, it's a little bit different in this office, being a leader,
So when you're walking them through the process, is there any feedback that you get from them? Do you ask any questions afterwards to kind of get their feedback?
I don't actually, and that was my client that just called. I think she might be lost.
Well, take care of that, solve her problem. That's what you're there for. But think about the processes afterwards when they are through, how you then could use their input to then affect other ones that are coming through as well.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? I have done that. And I had, I've had a number of clients who crawled out of the egg, crawled out of that chair and they forgot the doorbell, or they forgot the 10 minutes of silence. So because that's happened 2 or 3 times, I'm always reminding clients, even if you've been here last week, don't forget the doorbell, and don't forget the 10 minutes of silence, and just happened yesterday again. So that they forgot the 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So after that happened once or twice, then yes, I added it to my process to actually start talking to clients and reminding them of that.
Well, see, that's where you're using yourself in your leadership role then to help those that are coming through. So you see what I'm saying? So you're essentially leading your new clients through the process.
Yes.
So.
Right,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I'm gonna take off.
Okay. Bye. Good
Bye,
to see
Tina.
you. Bye, Tina. Okay, bye.
Bye, Tina.
Okay, number 4, I would say, is kind of acknowledging achievements, or when you see something good. I think positive reinforcement and understanding when someone's done a good job to kind of highlight that. You need to kind of praise your team when they are doing a good job, or when they've done something maybe different way that you would have done it, but the job has gotten done and successfully. You need to kind of recognize that, even little things that you necessarily, it doesn't have to be a big project that's gotten done. It can be something very simple, but just making suggestions and acknowledging that some things needed to be changed, so you find a solution. We were having some trouble with our ribbon cutting dollar plaques. They were coming back broken, and Kathy gets a little frustrated with that when we were purchasing from our normal suppliers. So we had gone through that, and we bought new ones this past week, and it's worked out much better. But again, there was a solution that Kathy was frustrated with, because she is the one that's mainly dealing with putting those together for us and getting all that together. Now, when her processes, they're end up broken, they're not looking right, then she gets frustrated. So there's a way that we have to try to work through that. So instead of her just being frustrated, we had to figure that. But I wouldn't have known that had she not communicated with me or said these are not good. So those are just little things.
That's actually, to me, I would say that's kind of a big deal, because that's recognizing that Kathy is probably a very process-oriented person, and so, where we might be like, no big deal, where someone who is very process-oriented and very detail-oriented, something like that is a huge deal for them, and just making sure that just because it's not a big deal to us, and recognize that it was a big deal to her, to me, that is a really great example of leadership.
Angie, I agree with you on that one. I was just saying last week, dealing with all these golf tournaments that we've been dealing with, and just issues that come up and some other stuff, because my whole day is planning. I mean, that's what I do. It just comes naturally to me, so I don't stress out about it, right? But other people who don't do that on a daily basis, that's like, it freaks them out. So I've had to learn, okay, instead of being like, it's fine, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, I need to listen to what their concerns are about it, and then just reassure them that it's taken care of. Not be like, I got this, it's fine, don't you worry, kind of blowing them off, which I don't think I'm doing, but I feel like I'm doing. And really, really listen to the fact that this is not what they do for a living. This is not their daily thing. So they're going to have more trouble comprehending and processing the process. And so this last golf tournament we've had, I had to schedule a special meeting just to kind of, here's what we're doing, here's what every individual person is going to be doing. 'Cause I don't want to just micromanage people either and be like, here's this checklist of things, and make them think, oh, what does she think I don't know what I'm doing? Because I don't know what they don't know. Unless you tell me I don't know what you don't know. So I've had to learn that even though it comes easy for me, it might not come easy to someone else, and appreciate that part of it. So I think that is part of listening and communicating as well, that not everybody's strengths are in one area.
If you have a certain role that you're a manager or a leader, I think a key concept is educating the people around you with the knowledge that you have. Now, they may already know some of it, but if you can bring them forward and you have a method of teaching that is taking into consideration their feelings, their goals, their needs, their wants, and you can teach them something, what you are making happen is they can become more efficient and get better at what they do, and then step into a position which makes your life as a leader much easier, where you can give them the opportunity to start leading, start guiding. Because good leaders build good leaders. So if you're willing to educate people around you where they can learn how to do things efficiently, that way they can make the best decisions, they can become leaders, they can create good leaders. You have a really, that's where you used the word about a half hour ago, team. If we all work together and we're concerned about what other people are thinking, about how to help them get better at what they're doing, everybody becomes efficient. And then you have an effective group that's productive. I think that listening, empathy, teaching, educating people about what they should be doing and how to do it better, those are the keys to being a good leader, I think.
Number 5 I have is humility.
Big one.
So, leadership to me is not necessarily about giving orders. You have to be open to receiving thoughts and knowing that in order to achieve the goal, it's not all you. It has to be those that are around you that you are supporting and lifting up, and ultimately you have to work together to get to that goal. One person is not going to solve all the world's problems. That's certainly true. We're all a big collective whole. We make that collection makes the things go around. So does anybody have a good thing they think about like a humility moment, or where maybe like anything going? We all have to be humble in our...
I think humility is one of the most important qualities for us to always continually work on and develop. I love, the Bible says before honor comes humility, and the higher, I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but the more we elevate in our businesses, in our lives, the more opportunities that we have, then the more humble we also must be. And we've been in our Bible study, our KW Bible study, we've been reading Leadership by the Good Book. It's the gentleman, gosh, I can't think of his name. David, anyway, he's the founder of Worldwide Technologies. He's the first black billionaire. I think he's the first black billionaire. But anyway, it's a fantastic book, but he really talks about that a lot, humility, and he basically says, everything I have is because of, not to give everybody a sermon here, but it's because of God. And that for me is just, like, that's just a constant reminder. Like, I can do nothing without Jesus at the end of the day. And if I remember that, I mean, I don't, not to offend anybody who might not be Christian, but for me, if I remember that, then that's going to help me stay humble.
I think you see a lot of times when you see organizations break down, or I'm kind of more thinking in the nonprofit world, not big business, but I think it happens in big business too, is people who get too big for their britches or lose their humility a little bit and think, well, I'm the only person that can get this done, and if I left, this whole place would fall apart. And then they leave, and it's like, oh, you're still standing. It's like that whole idea that it's me, I'm the one that's making this whole cog run, can be destructive, because not only to the organization, but to yourself as a person. If you're not willing to humble yourself and be like, I'm just part of this group, even if you are the leader or the manager, you're still just part of a group, and if you weren't there anymore, they'd find a new leader, and it would be just fine.
Well, just think how much more effective it would have been, like in my retail thing, if it would have been the team goal at the very beginning when you walked in.
Yep.
And everybody was working to the same goal. There was one number, nobody cared.
Different directions.
And all we were trying to do was take care of the customer and focus on them. And that's what I think, when you lose that, then you've
lost a lot.
Yeah. Because
and you lose your team too, because then they don't have trust in you and faith in you anymore, and you lose all those leadership qualities that you were talking about.
We had somebody said that a member recently, but they had the same thing happen to them. They started a position, and then they had 3 fundraiser people, but they pitted all the fundraiser people against one another.
Oh, geez, that's the worst thing you do.
And so they were all
you need all
targeted
those
to
people.
goals, and they were like, who was gonna, whoever got the most got this. And so
Oh,
I think when you look at that, you've fundamentally just broken up the entire leadership and just kind of
I
separated.
mean, like sales goals are one thing, like in real
Everybody has
estate
a
or
goal,
something like
yeah.
that. Like, oh, my personal sales goals are this, this, and this. But when you're pitting people against each other,
you
that's
need
dangerous.
to really watch that. You kind of use any kind of humility or teamwork there too. So those are my 5 tools for leadership development. And I always think there was something that I came across the other day about just taking like a simple Post-it and writing down your goal or what you're trying to achieve. So post it to promote it is what I wanted to kind of say. So leave it on your computer screen on your desk, and then you're constantly promoting that to yourself and to your team. So whatever goal you're trying to achieve, post it to promote it. So I'm going to leave you with that little tidbit today. So.
I do one more thing. I have a book that reminds me of what we're talking about. We did this at the office. It's your work love languages.
Okay.
I'll send it to Belle if you want to post it, because it's interesting. You read you take the test, and you read the book too, but you take this test, and it's to help managers and leaders understand their team and what their love languages are, so that you can effectively work better as a team. And subsequently, like my personal love languages and my work love languages are, like, one of them is like the top one for my personal is the bottom for my business one. So me, acts of service, that's like, for me, obviously my personal love language. But in the book, the acts of service is someone helping me, and I'm like, that's the last one. Like, I want to be able to say, I need your help. I don't want you to come like every 5 minutes and ask me, can I help you? But my first one at work is words of affirmation. But they're like words of affirmation, acts of service. They're basically the same. Gifts, personal time, stuff like that. And so you pick your top 3 that you like, but then the one that you don't like. And I think that one that you don't like is really, really important for people that you work with to understand.
Yeah.
Maybe you are not a hugger. Maybe you don't want people to tell you how great you are. Whatever it might be. I think that one that you don't like is huge. The 3 you do like is great. But that one is. And we shared them with everybody. And we shared them with the whole office. So okay, wait a minute, if I need to go communicate with Tony, I maybe want to look at this again. So maybe when I start out, I need to say, if it's yours is words of affirmation, hey, I just wanted to start off by saying, I think everything you're doing is great, all the great fall stuff we had, you've really pivoted during COVID, whatever. And then you can, get into the other stuff, but I think knowing those before you communicate with someone is huge. Or if you're trying to say thank you to somebody, you don't want to give them you try to thank them and then you do the thing they hate. It's the opposite. Like, hey, I hate surprises, and you show up at the door, surprise!
We'll find out in a little bit.
Yeah.
Does anybody else anything they want to add?
Just real quick to touch on what Lisa said about, people, not assuming if you're in leadership role that you're indispensable. I would say the converse is very important, is if you are in a leadership role, don't have the attitude that your employees are replaceable. Because I think that's kind of historically has kind of been a thing, like, oh, if you're replaceable, like, wait a second. I mean, in my opinion, if I have somebody valuable on my team, they're not replaceable. They're important.
And you got to recognize that too. You can't forget
absolutely.
that. So
right, you got to treat them as such. And training, I hate training people. So if I've got you and I like you, I'm gonna do everything I can to keep you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for our first hybrid one, and for bearing with me.
And we'll be back here next month, right?
We'll be here next month. So Angie, mark that on your calendar for me.
In person, Angie.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Chris. Have a good day.
I'll be there next time.
Okay.
Bye, Chris. Bye, Ange.
Thank you, everybody.